Quran recitation, inshallah, then the meaning of the verses.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Alaikum assalam wa barakatuh.
جزاك خير. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين كذبوا بآياتنا واستكبروا عنها لا تفتح لهم أبواب السماء ولا يدخلون الجنة حتى يلج الجمل في سم الخياط وكذلك نجزي المجرمين. لهم من جهنم مهاد ومن فوقهم غواش وكذلك نجزي الظالمين. والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون. ونزعنا ما في صدورهم من غل تجري من تحتهم الأنهار وقالوا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله لقد جاءت رسل ربنا بالحق ونودوا أن تلكم الجنة أورثتموها بما كنتم تعملون. ونادى أصحاب الجنة أصحاب النار أن قد وجدنا ما وعدنا ربنا حقا فهل وجدتم ما وعد ربكم حقا؟ قالوا نعم. فأذن مؤذن بينهم لعنة الله على الظالمين. الذين يصدون عن سبيل الله ويبغونها عوجا وهم بالآخرة كافرون وبينهما حجاب. وعلى الأعراف رجال يعرفون كلا بسيماهم ونادوا أصحاب الجنة أن سلام عليكم لم يدخلوها وهم يطمعون. وإذا صرفت أبصارهم تلقاء أصحاب النار قالوا ربنا لا تجعلنا مع القوم الظالمين. ونادى أصحاب الأعراف رجالا يعرفونهم بسيماهم قالوا ما أغنى عنكم جمعكم وما كنتم تستكبرون أهؤلاء الذين أقسمتم لا ينالهم الله برحمة ادخلوا الجنة لا خوف عليكم ولا أنتم تحزنون. ونادى أصحاب النار أصحاب الجنة أن أفيضوا علينا من الماء أو مما رزقكم الله قالوا إن الله حرمهما على الكافرين الذين اتخذوا دينهم لهوا ولعبا وغرتهم الحياة الدنيا فاليوم ننساهم كما نسيتم لقاء يومهم هذا وما كانوا بآياتنا يجحدون صدق الله العظيم.
Verily, those who belie our ayat and treat them with arrogance, for them the gates of heaven will not be opened, and they will not enter paradise until the camel goes through the eye of the needle. Thus do we recompense the mujrimun. There will be beds of fire and over coverings. Thus do we recompense the dhalimun. But those who believe and work righteousness, we not tax any person beyond his scope. Such are the dwellers of paradise. They will abide therein. Rivers flowing under them, they will all say, all praise and thanks to be Allah, who has guided us to this. And never could we have found guidance, were it not that Allah has guided us. Indeed, the messenger of our Lord did come with the truth. And it will be cried out to them, this is the paradise which you have inherited for what you used to do. And the dwellers of paradise will call out to the dwellers of fire, saying, we have indeed found true what our Lord has promised us. Have you also found true what your Lord promised? Warnings? They shall say yes. And then a crier will proclaim, the curse of Allah is on the dhalimun. Those hindered from the path of Allah and would seek to make it crooked, and they were disbelievers in hereafter. And between them will be a bare screen and al-a'raf, a wall with elevated places will be men, whose good and evil deeds are scaled equal, who would recognize all of the paradise and fire people. By the marks, the dwellers of paradise and their white faces, and the dwellers of Jahannam by their black faces. They will call out to the dwellers of paradise, saying, Salam alaikum. And at that time, they, men of Al-A'raf, will not yet have entered paradise, but they will hope to enter it with certainty. And when the eyes will be turned towards the dwellers of fire, they will say, O Lord, place us not with the people who are dhalimun. And the men of Al-A'raf will call unto the men who they would recognize by the mark, saying, of what benefit to you were with your great numbers, and hordes of wealth, and your arrogance against faith, are those of whom you swore that Allah would never show to mercy? Enter paradise. No fear shall be on you, nor shall you grieve. And the dwellers of fire will call to the dwellers of paradise, saying, pour onto us some water or anything that Allah has provided you. They will say, Allah has forbidden us to the disbelievers, who took their religion as an amusement and play, and as their life, world deceived them. So this day we shall forget them, as they forgot the meeting of this day, and as they used to reject our ayahs.
Yes, thank you. Jazakumullah khair. It's a beautiful choice of beautiful verses and its meanings. So on for our talk tonight, we are really happy that Brother Ibraheem Khalifa will join us, inshallah, and he will give the lectures about disconnect to reconnect. It looks like a very interesting subject, and I hope everybody will share listening and share also the interactive questions, answers afterward. Jazakumullah khair, Brother Ibraheem. I'll give it to you.
Great. Thank you, Brother Sami. And Brother Ikram for inviting me tonight. It's a pleasure to join you all this evening. I see we have a comfortable sized group, so I'm going to ask and encourage people to participate and ask questions as we go along. Brother Sami or Ikram, is it possible for me to share my screen? I don't know if I need to be kind of a co-host to do that. I was hoping to just have some talking points to reference. I'll go ahead and begin. I'll just introduce myself while we're figuring that out. Thank you, Brother Sami. So my name is Ibraheem Khalifa. I've been in this community for a while now. I went to school here at NC State University, and I work in the technology field. I co-founded a startup several years back in Durham called Freedom, that was focused on the area of productivity, specifically trying to understand how we manage our time when working, and we manage our distractions on all of our devices. Since most of our work now is done on electronic devices, how do we filter out the content that we don't want to be tempted by, and focus on the things that we do value and want to do. So that was my first startup, and now I actually work at a different company called Republic Wireless on a product called Relay. Relay is it's a kid's first smartphone, and it's a screen-free smartphone. So we launched this about 2 years back, targeted towards younger kids whose parents didn't want to get them a iPhone between the ages of like 6 and 10, but they still wanted to connect with them. And so we created this device that was smaller than a smartphone, easier for a kid to use, and didn't have a screen. So you didn't have all the dangers that come along with a screen. So I say those things because this has been an area of passion for me, and an area of interest, is trying to understand, in this age where we have so many different tools that technology provides us, how do we use those tools for improving our lives, as opposed to getting sucked into those rabbit holes that we all get sucked into, whether it's cat videos or Instagram posts. We've all been there, where after minutes or an hour, you're like, what just happened to my time? Where did it go? So for me, this is something that a topic that I care deeply about, and I think it's relevant in this time as it is in other times as well. So inshallah, let me see if I can share my screen here. Just give me a minute while I figure that out.
You're able to? If you can give me back the host, and then I was able to do it before, so I think I should be able to figure it out.
Sure, I can give you the host. Let's see here.
Okay. All right. So support.
So if you have the link, you can also just share it.
Is that an application control or a desktop control? Which one you prefer?
It doesn't matter. Either is fine.
Okay, so giving it to you now.
Okay, awesome. All right, great. All right, so let me go ahead and, can everyone see this?
Yes.
See my screen here?
Yes.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was sort of, take a minute to reflect a little bit on what's happened in the last month or two. I think we've all gone through kind of a very, very different, very unprecedented change in our lives. The sort of indication of that is that we're all here on a hangout, as opposed to doing this in person, which would have been sort of the normal thing to do. This would have been abnormal maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago. And with change, with uncertainty, comes uncomfortableness. And we all, to varying degrees, have had to deal with something uncomfortable in our lives over the past few weeks. And I wanted to start with this reflection on this verse from the Quran that talks about it. This is from Surah Al Imran, verse 146. And it talks about being steadfast. And the translation of the verse is, but they never lost assurance due to what afflicted them in the cause of Allah, nor did they weaken or submit, and Allah loves the steadfast. And this one word here, the steadfast, has a lot of depth, a lot of meaning. But in these times, I think it's important to reflect on this word and what it means and how we implement it. I think it's easy for us to look at all that's happening around us, the challenging circumstances. It's easy to sort of scroll through the news feed, looking at what's happening. And news media being what it is today, they like to dramatize. They like to focus on the things that are going to be the most shareable, that are going to get the most views. So it's in their interest to keep you engaged. And yes, everyone should be informed. Everyone should understand what they need to do. But spending hours on the New York Times website, or clicking on refresh and seeing the latest numbers, on statistics, it's not going to be something that's productive. So what I wanted to emphasize is this notion of being steadfast. And I found this article that was forwarded to me that was written by a gentleman by the name of C.S. Lewis, who is a famous author, but he wrote something actually in 1948 called, it was an essay called on Living in an Atomic Age. And he talked about basically the sense of despair that people had because they had just experienced, if you recall or think back to your history lessons, in 1948, this country had just seen its first sort of nuclear explosion at the end of World War II. And people were dealing with sort of all of this uncertainty around the atomic age, where anybody could, at the press of a button, eliminate large swaths of population, something that was unimaginable before. And he wrote this piece that talked about saying, like, look, the way that you live now is the same way that you used to live yesterday, and the same way that you used to live a week ago. You as a person, you as an individual, the rights of others on you, your obligations to your creator, like none of those things have changed. And the first thing that you should do is to pull yourself together and then understand what the next step is that you have to take, and then the step after that. And I found that sort of aligned really well with this verse that says, hey, be steadfast, and not wallow in self-despair, but think about basically what action you need to take in the moment right now. And then after that action, think of the next action. And inshallah, with that, we'll get through, this difficult time and into easier times. So I thought that was interesting, the way that it was written and phrased. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about sort of what Dr. Sameh alluded to, which is sort of disconnecting to reconnect. I think the other, verse that comes to mind is Innamal usri yusra, right? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that surely with hardship, with difficulty comes ease. And one of the silver linings for me personally during this time has been spending more time with family. And that comes with its challenges as well. You're around the same 3 or 4 or 5 people 24/7. Working from home is different when your kids are at school versus being around the house. So it's not, working from home in this time for me, as I'm sure it is for a lot of you guys as well, is a little different. But there has been some benefits to that. I have 3 young kids, alhamdulillah. I have a daughter, Lina, who's 6, a son, Zaid, who's 4, and our youngest, Zara, she's 10 months old as of yesterday. And, I've gotten to see some things that sometimes I, wouldn't get to see. So my daughter, Lina, she has learned how to ride a bike without her training wheels recently, which was amazing to see. And then my youngest, I actually saw her take her first crawling steps right in front of me. So, I think being able to spend time with family has been a real blessing in this time. And one of the challenges that I've personally faced, as I'm sure others have as well, is sort of how to divide up that time, because there is no office time and home time. It's all combined into one. So I'm sure everyone has seen the articles out there around creating a space so that when you are when you're at work, you're in that space, you're in that zone, you get ready for work the same way that you normally would get ready for work. And then you have some allotted time for work, so that at the end of your day, your working day, or over lunchtime, you can actually disconnect and take a break. So I think that's the first point here, really, is to make sure that you're still following somewhat of a schedule. I think it's very easy for work to kind of bleed over into the evening and into the weekends. And I think making sure that you still take time for your work, you allot time for that, you allot time for your family, and you also allot time for yourself. One of the things I've missed is being able to go to the masjid and pray. That was for me a great time to sort of really focus and disconnect. And now that is no longer there, so I've had to adjust and try to still make time where it's just myself. I can do things that are important to me. And then technology in general. I think one of my kids called me out recently and said, hey, Baba, what are you doing on your phone? And my kids were playing in the backyard in the garden, and they called me out and they said, hey, look, why aren't you paying attention to us? What's so important on your phone that it could be worth missing engaging with us? And it's so true. I had read a book recently called Digital Minimalism. I highly recommend this book if you're interested in sort of learning more about how to consciously manage your time. But really, the central point that the author Cal Newport makes is that digital minimalism is a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on activities that support the things you value. So, the philosophy that I try to follow, and after much reading have kind of gravitated towards, is understanding that, look, technology is a tool, just like every other tool that you have at your disposal. And you have to make an active decision on how you want to use that tool. Otherwise, it can take up and suck up a lot of your time. So instead of trying to say, hey, look, I'm just not going to use technology in today's world, that's basically impossible. It's to say, like, what are the components of technology? What are the aspects of technology? What apps on my phone? What devices? How much time do I actually want to spend? And what are the activities that add value to my life versus what are the ones that don't add value to my life? And if you sort of take a step and think through that, you get to some really good conclusions as far as how you are wanting to use your devices and what things you're wanting to use them for. So I'll focus on one example. I mean, there's a lot of space there, and I don't want to take more time than I was allotted today. But I wanted to focus on one aspect of that I think is especially important in these times, and that is the power of voice to connect us. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. Let's see here. So when I started the presentation, I talked a little bit about my role and what I do. So at the company that I work on today, we have this device that has no screen. It has just voice for communication. And I found there's an article that was published by a professor in psychology at Yale University. And they did a very interesting study. They looked at different mediums of communication. Voice, only video, video and voice, images, and they measured people's understanding of emotion from the other person. And intuitively, what you would think is that video would be the most effective medium of communication. It would convey the most about the person's emotional state, about the content itself. But what the study actually found is that out of all these different modes of communication, right, like an audio only call, a FaceTime, and video still with no voice, the one that had the most powerful impact and conveyed the most empathy was voice with no video. And that's interesting because I think that for us practically, a lot of times we just text message, or maybe we'll do a FaceTime or something like that. But very rarely in today's day and age do we actually just make a phone call. But in these times, especially when we're not seeing people in person, the power of voice is very, very significant. So over the past few weeks and days, what I've tried to do is actually make time to place phone calls to folks. And I found that to be a very, very powerful way to connect on a fairly deep level. And you end up talking about things that you normally wouldn't unless you were in person. So I found that to be a very effective tool to connect deeply with other people, especially in this time. And I found it to be a very, very good use of sort of the technology that we have. So that's my main takeaway for folks here is hey, if you haven't already, take some time out, go through your contacts, go through your list of relatives, find somebody that you haven't connected with in a while, and take some time out to actually make a phone call and just have a conversation with them. And I hope you find that as fulfilling and as rewarding as I found it in the past few weeks. I did want to leave you guys with, by the way, you don't have to take any of this information down. Brother Ikram, I think we'll email this out to you in case anybody wants to learn more or dig into some of these references. I also included a slide that's been helpful to me as I've navigated this time, and I wanted to share it with you all. There is, on the right-hand side here, is a crisis line that's been run by Sound Vision, an organization who has created a way for basically Muslims to access help with depression, help with any sort of abuse, anything like that. You can always text this number and it'll connect you with someone who can provide counseling. So I think in these times it's important to have that as a resource. And then below that, some activities for the kids that I've found really helpful. This first link has a whole bunch of different, K through 12 activities, different types of information for kids. And then there's a bunch of virtual religious resources that I've personally found helpful as well. So I wanted to share that with you. But that's it for me. I wanted to open it up for kind of comments and questions from you all. First off, how have you guys sort of coped, or what are some strategies that you've used to maybe use technology in ways to connect with other people or to enhance the sort of lives of your family in these challenging times?
Well, just talking about my personal experience, I cannot really extend that to others by just nature of my work. I spend quite a few hours out of the house, and I cannot tell you how much blessing nowadays that I've been able to spend quite a bit of time with the family, actually get closer to them, know what they like and don't like. So it's just really, really blessing in disguise. That's for the people that really looked upon the whole experience as negative. There's just a lot of positives coming out of it. I mean, just look at the example of all this plethora, huge amount of chats and Zooms, conferences, that people learn more about religions actually now than ever. It's very interesting what you said. Just quick comment about that. The voice is a powerful. SubhanAllah, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in several of his verses, as-sam'u wal-absar wal-afida, that the first thing, the very first sense that was created in infants, human beings, is the sama. This is how we learn. That's how we absorb information, how we get to our hearts, and then we reflect on it, understand it, and it becomes, deep embedded in our heart. So that's really, really, really makes perfect sense. It's beautiful what you said, and really connect to the Quran.
Yeah.
Jazakallah.
Well, actually, when you just said that, it reminded me also of sort of the example that we have in our tradition when, the Quran was revealed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have revealed it in many different ways. He could have sent down a book or sent down pages, but instead, he sent down the angel Jibreel to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and recited it, and asked him to repeat it. So it was spoken, it was voice, and it was the oral word. So I think that there's a lot of power, and our religion backs that up. It tells us that this is a very important medium. Jazakallah khairan, Brother Sami. Any other reflections or comments or just general feedback?
All right, just for everybody, you can unmute yourself and mute as well. With if you're joining in by a phone call, by a phone line, that's going to be *6. So I guess with my child being in the school and that she is homeschooling, I think one of the things that was very fruitful was knowing what type of schoolwork she does, and how efficiently the school connected the online training But at the same time, I would have to say it's a very daunting task, taking that upon yourself, homeschooling a child alongside your work from home. So, I mean, I guess everybody's on the same boat. So that I have seen many Facebook posts about this as to whether every parent is scratching their head nowadays and so forth. So not to take away from your time with the family members and your children and being participating in their schoolwork, but it definitely is being challenging.
Yeah, no, I think that a lot of parents I talk to are faced with that. I think for me, I have gotten a newfound sense of appreciation for how much work our teachers put in for our children, 8 hours a day. And I think the other side of it that a lot of people have emphasized to me is that children, one, everybody's in the same boat, and two, there's a lot of types of growth and development, especially for the younger kids. I mean, obviously, if you're in high school or even middle school, maybe it's a little different because you have certain milestones you need to hit. But at the younger ages, at least, there's a lot of development that happens outside of the academic side, whether it's behavioral, whether it's other skills that I think this time, maybe can be used to sort of teach some of those, which personally I believe are very, very important, just as important as the academic side. So inshallah, don't stress too much. Inshallah, your kids will be just fine. All right. Jazakallah khair, and I really appreciate it. Brother Ikram, I guess if you would share this presentation with folks, and you can always, ask me questions. I think my email address will be on there. You can email me any questions that you have. But I appreciate you guys reaching out to me and inviting me to be a part of this blessed gathering. Jazakallah khair, and I'll hand it back to you, Brother Sami.
Jazakallah khair. That was again beautiful and it's timely. May Allah reward you for this talk and for your good deeds, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.
Does anybody take it for as a dua, inshallah, for all of us and for the ummah? Muhammad Badawi. Brother Muhammad Badawi.
Assalamualaikum. I'm sorry, I was listening in and out, and I'm actually making food, so I have my headphones on. Jazakallah khair, akhi, for the great topic, Akhuna Ibraheem. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. I actually wanted to share something, and then I think my phone was on mute. Can you guys hear me, actually?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
We can hear you very well.
Yeah, if you just allow me for a minute, I think one of the things that I got out of this time that we're living in is, subhanallah, how much how important is it for us to be agents of change as far as knowing and having good knowledge of Islam that we can pass down to our kids. And speaking about myself, subhanallah, you just realize how much you have shortcoming, that you can do so much more for your kids, because we're so out and about that we're just constantly busy. And subhanallah, it's been a blessing and an eye-opener. So that's my little reflection.
Jazakallah khairan for sharing. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's humbling to have that responsibility, to shoulder that responsibility on your own, and you do realize how many shortcomings you have. Jazakallah khairan for sharing that.
Okay, Brother Muhammad Badawi, can you lead us into the dua? Inshallah.
Just one more question I had for anybody, inshallah. Just a reflection. I mean, I think, Dr. Yasser Qadi today also basically mentioned that even though we might be subjected to isolation and being at home, still we are in very much at luxury, living in luxury. So it is the biggest name actually. But at the same time, would you also, or how much would you account for Allah giving us all a time out? I mean, would that factor into the consideration that you just don't enjoy this stay at home, that you would concentrate on worshipping more and making more dua? Just a thought on that, if anybody can relate to it.
So, I had somebody else kind of share some comments around, Ramadan and this time that's coming up. And I think it's important to set our expectations realistically. That, I think no matter how, much you spend time on yourself and you reflect, I think this Ramadan will be challenging. I think it'll be challenging because we won't have the Taraweeh prayers the way that we're normally accustomed to. And so, on all the gatherings that we generally have, which encourage us to do more good and to motivate us, obviously we'll do our best as we use these virtual sessions and seminars to do that. But I think we need to be realistic and just know that this month will be challenging. And then inshallah, there will be brighter days ahead. But let's be realistic about what we can and cannot accomplish, because we're balancing and juggling a lot of things. So that would be my perspective here.
We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to, inshallah, to guide us in this hard time, challenging time for all of us, and for many people that they lost their regular life, lost their job, lost any loved ones. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala support them and make that challenging time, inshallah, in our day of judgment, day of easiness. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our patience, our perseverance, and give us the opportunity in the remaining days of our life to perform better than the previous life. I hope, inshallah, that this reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring all of us back to our senses and to reflect more about things that we took for granted, and even the toilet paper that we took for granted, and now the people are fighting to get rolled too, subhanallah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us value the things that we have not put in our mind before to value, and value the time with the family, time with the parents. To visit. Now some people, they are prevented from visiting their parents because of the vulnerability of the old age. So then these are things that reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He is in control, and we are in need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني. We need to humble ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we need to continuously pray to Him to accept our dua, to accept our prayer, and to grant us the highest place in Jannah, inshallah. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
جزاكم الله خيرا جميعا.
Jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah for everybody and for attended, and inshallah Brother Ibrahim will deliver us will send us the presentation so everybody can share it and benefit from it, inshallah. May Allah reward you all, and we'll see you inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.